Welcome into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for the Week 11 Fantasy Quarterback Rankings. There we go. And I am doing this without notes today, so I do have a little bit of a crutch over here showing you my EV rankings. That's equalized value. That is very similar to average fantasy points per game. However, it takes consistency into account, so it is less susceptible to one big game or one terrible game even dumping or really pumping up the stats. I usually wait at the start of the season to get 3 data points before I start doing any projections. There are some players in here, Kyler Murray, Josh Dobbs, actually, because I'm only projecting him based on his Minnesota production so far. And somebody else I'll try to remember to point out that don't have that, and you will kind of see that in how they're projected. It's Tommy DeVito is the other one. If you have any questions about it, feel free to ask. It's not some top secret formula or whatever. It is slightly predictive, and that goes in hand with the consistency theme, favoring consistency over boom or bustness. And as always, red is good, blue is bad. The darker the red, the deeper the blue, the better, the worse. And white is neutral, and that goes in terms of the projections as well as where I have highlighted right here the player temperature gauge, basically a mashup of a matchup gauge as well as taking into account the actual player's talent level and how likely they are to be okay in a bad matchup or take advantage of a good matchup. You can find all of these rankings up at the website, www.theffforge.com. They should be up by Wednesday evening on the website. These should be up by the time that this video goes live. I also want to let you know, hour and a half we're going to go on Thursday prior to kickoff for any start-sit questions. I will be here on YouTube live, and last weekend on Sunday I ended up sticking around for the entirety of the morning game, from 45 minutes prior to it up till kickoff of the main slate of games, over 4 hours. It was fun. So I'm going to start going, I guess I'll go like 3 hours prior to kickoff for the regular slate of games that I will be live for any of your start-sit questions. So no rush to come see me. Gives you a little bit of a bigger time frame. All right, I think that covers every announcement that I have. So onto my DFS buys of last week and how I did there. I will give you DFS buys at the end of this video for week 11. For my not dirt cheap option, I gave you Joe Burrow at $6,800 versus Houston. He ended up as the quarterback 8, so I would say that worked out all right at least. And a cheapish option, I gave you Brock Purdy at $5,700 for Seattle. Did even better than that, quarterback 6. And just a little bit less good than Joe Burrow was Russell Wilson, who I gave you in the bargain bin at $5,200 versus Buffalo, and it as the quarterback 10. So I think I did well there. For my love 'em and my fade 'em, love 'em was Will Levis, so massive failure there, but my fade was Justin Fields, and that was a massive success because he got you 0 points if you started him. That obviously did not qualify to actually say if I did good or bad on that. So let's move on to the Week 11 rankings. Welcome back, and here is my first tier that you've been able to see on the screen. I keep doing that. The first 2 quarterbacks, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, there's 0% chance that I am sitting either of these two, but we have a big second tier. And like I said, I'm going without notes for this video for a couple of reasons, but in part, mostly because I feel pretty comfortable with not necessarily the exact order that I have, but why I have guys over other guys, and it's fresh in my head because I just got done doing these. So at quarterback 3, first I'll just list them off. We've got CJ Stroud, followed by Lamar Jackson, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Dak Prescott, Justin Herbert, Josh Allen at quarterback 9, Sam Howell, Brock Purdy, Kyler Murray, Joe Burrow, Justin Fields, and Josh Dobbs. And at quarterback 15 to finish that up, Josh Dobbs, if I did not say, he was, one of the quarterbacks who's got a limited amount of inputs. And as you can see, the projections, the expected range here, absolutely loves him. He projected for my single projection number as the number 1 quarterback. So, there is an argument for Josh Dobbs based on how he's performed so far in Minnesota to say, I'm starting him over anybody. And so that is why I still have him in this tier, the same tier as CJ Stroud. There are arguments for any of these guys to be played ahead of one another. So I think to start off, CJ Stroud has been absolutely amazing. And as you can see from the EV score, he is my EV quarterback 3 on the season so far. He has been absolutely great. And he's going up against Arizona, not against Houston. I think that'll probably be a pretty high-scoring game. I like that to be a back-and-forth type of affair, once again, for C.J. Stroud. And Arizona's defense is not going to, make me afraid of playing C.J. Stroud. That's for sure. And I have him ahead of Lamar Jackson, who, as you can see, EV quarterback 13. So it has been quite boom or bust for Lamar so far this season. Projections still really like him here against Cincinnati because of what he can do with his on the ground, with his rushing abilities. That goes a long ways. And in a game against Cincinnati, first of all, when we get to Joe Burrow, one of my arguments for Joe Burrow, even though Baltimore is a really good defense, is that interdivisional matchups such as these, especially ones like these, Baltimore, Cincinnati, just as we saw last week, Baltimore, Cleveland, 2 of the best defenses in the league and one of the highest scoring games in the league, things can kind of get thrown out of the window a little bit. And I think part of that is a guy like Lamar Jackson, as far as why I like him this week, is probably going to put it all out on the line. He's not going to be too afraid of his health. He's going to be trying to make plays, and I think plenty of the time that'll be with his feet. That is what I'm banking on, and so that is why I do have him ranked this high, despite the fact that ultimately you look at the list in this tier, he is one of the worst options so far as how has he performed on the season for you. Then we have Tua Tagovailoa here going up against Las Vegas, and they have been surprisingly good defensively. They are the 9th worst quarterback so far on the season matchup for quarterbacks on the season, but something about this coming off, another loss from Miami, I think they're going to be going all out here against Las Vegas. I think there's a good shot at a high-scoring game for Tua, so I am optimistic about the outcome. But that's the argument against Tua here if you wanted to play some of these other guys ahead of him. Then we get to Jared Goff going up against Chicago. Now, part of me initially wants to say, all right, well, I don't really like Jared Goff because they're just going to run the ball against Chicago, right? They're a bad team. Well, Chicago's run defense has been surprisingly, really good. And so maybe that's not the case. And you can see even my player temperature gauge here absolutely loves Jared Goff, thinks he's in the best situation to have an above average type of day, a ceiling kind of day. And I'm not going to bet against the passing work against Chicago. It's not a defense that frightens me. A divisional matchup, there's going to be no mercy. So I'm comfortable with Jared Goff, and I'm more comfortable that they're not just going to be relying on the run game, given the fact that Chicago's run defense has been quite good. Then we have Dak Prescott here at my quarterback 7, going up against Carolina, and so, yeah, I could put him higher. It feels like a really good matchup. Have seen people put the quarterback that's going up against Carolina a lot of weeks, very, very well ranked. The issue is, much like Las Vegas, Carolina has been a very not great matchup for quarterbacks. Teams have been able to run a lot against Carolina. This has been a little bit less the case as of late, I think for no other reason than they faced a few teams who could not get the run game going against them. So as of right now, they stand as the 8th worst quarterback matchup. I'm not too concerned about it. The run game for Dallas hasn't been too great either, so it might just be another good Dak Prescott week. But I do like these other guys just a little bit more than him. He's right in that argument. The player temperature gauge says so too. Then we come to Justin Herbert, who on the season has been very great. EV quarterback 4. The issue here is that Green Bay, once again, very tough. They currently stand as the 3rd worst matchup for quarterbacks. And so I have a bust tag on him, essentially. I am fading Justin Herbert this week. Still ranking him 8, but if you do happen to have CJ Stroud and him, I will go CJ Stroud over him happily. Otherwise, just maybe don't be expecting a huge game from Justin Herbert. Maybe play someone who gives you a little bit of a better of a ceiling than a floor at your flex spot if it comes down to that. That type of thing would be the only planning that you can really do around this because, once again, Justin Herbert's been absolutely fantastic over the season, and I'm really not expecting him to have a bad game against Green Bay. Just a limited game is very possible. And Josh Allen, we're in similar circumstances here. The New York Jets, very good against the pass. We know that. Josh Allen has been very good on the season as of late. He hasn't been great. Still the EV quarterback, too, though, even after some not so great games. And as you can see, a very wide spread for him in terms of the outcome here. 11.2 points to 22.1. The blue to the red at the low end to the high end, and a neutral matchup. So it's really tough to say what to expect in this game for Josh Allen. Originally, like the single projected number that I have for him was quite a bit lower than this. But at the end of the day, had to think about it, and it's like, yeah, if I had Josh Allen and Sam Howell, I'm going to take that shot. Sam Howell's running into this situation against the Giants where teams are usually able to run a lot against the Giants. A lot of the season, they've been not a great matchup for quarterbacks, not as good of a matchup as you would think, just seeing the New York Giants name out there and how bad of a team that they've been. And so you would think that this should be a running game for Washington. The only thing is, I don't think that's really in their DNA. We saw it for years with Kansas City under Eric Bieniemy as the offensive coordinator. I think they just liked to continue to pass against teams. So, yes, there could be a few less passes. There could be a little bit more running for Brian Robinson in this game compared to Washington's average, but I still expect a lot of passing for Sam Howell. And I think that's where you get this projection on the low end of like 16 points, one of the highest lower expectations that there is amongst all of my projections. Is that, the floor, it's not a defense that you're afraid of in terms of how good they are against the pass. It's just that usually teams don't have to pass against them a whole lot. Just a really, really good floor for Sam Howell, and that's why originally I kind of liked him more than Josh Allen for the floor. Same with Brock Purdy, had him ahead of Josh Allen. And it's the same thing here for the floor and the ceiling, really, for him going up against Tampa Bay, a team who's allowed a lot of passing as of late, haven't been good against that. And I expect Brock Purdy and the San Francisco offense to take it to Tampa Bay pretty well. So, like them a lot, and I feel very comfortable with Brock Purdy, and I'm not afraid of him busting. And that brings us to Kyler Murray, who's going to be similar here, except even a higher ceiling. It's a very limited amount of data going into Kyler Murray right now. But regardless, he's going up against Houston, and like I told you, I expect this to be a high-scoring game. So I really do like Kyler Murray this week. He went out there, and he looked good in Week 1 in a totally new offense and everything. There was a little bit of rust that got shaken off, and it was very promising. It was essentially a best-case scenario for Kyler Murray outside of maybe having an even better fantasy day. But realistically, it was pretty much a best-case scenario for Kyler Murray, at least in terms of real-life football. So you like what you saw there. And then Joe Burrow, I have as my quarterback 18. As we know, really rough start to the season, so we can kind of ignore the projections here. But Baltimore is the worst single matchup for quarterbacks in fantasy football. It's a divisional matchup, so I'm going to give a little bit of faith to Joe Burrow, but I am afraid of maybe them not doing too great, going to be without T. Higgins again. Baltimore suffered a little bit of injury issues themselves, I think, on the defensive side. That may not help either in the matchup, though. Still, I'm just a little bit cautious with Joe Burrow, but the argument could be there to, once again, just start him over anybody else in this tier just because they have seemingly, for the most part, turned it around. Joe Burrow had a good fantasy week last week against Houston. I have nothing against him. There's a reason that I did not fade him, despite having him much lower in my rankings, and probably most people will have him. Then Justin Fields I have in at quarterback 14 here, going up against Detroit. He projects much better, as you can see from the expected range there as well. It's a decent matchup against Detroit. Not great, not terrible, but you wouldn't expect a bad game from it, specifically because he's going up against Detroit. EV quarterback 6 on the season so far in his games that he has played. Done very, very well for you. And I'm a little bit more confident this week than last week. Faded him last week because I wasn't so sure about that thumb. Well, now I'm confident if they're starting him that they feel pretty comfortable about where the thumb's at and his ability to throw. So I'm just one more week of healing. I'm a little less concerned about that than I was before, but I'm still a little bit concerned about it. And I think him, Josh Dobbs, and the next quarterback that I have ranked, Trevor Lawrence, are going to be ranked basically the same by everybody because these top 13 guys are pretty clearly the top 13. Justin Fields, it's easy to take that crutch of, well, I'm just a little bit concerned about him and to push him down because there's so many reasons to like everybody else that we have ranked above him, even though there are reasons to like him as well. So I think you're just going to find across the board, a lot of people having these guys ranked 14th, 15th, and 16th. And the reason that Josh Dobbs gets ranked 15th is, that same concern, I guess, about the recent production compared to concern about the thumb. Even though Josh Dobbs has been absolutely amazing, you can put him this low without having to get fear of being criticized for having him too low, because he's still Josh Dobbs. There's still questions about that. We still saw him in Arizona where, yes, he was good. He wasn't this good. And so that's what it comes down to. But you can still make the argument for Josh Dobbs over any of these guys if you really want to make that argument. I don't think there's very many people who are going to want to make that argument. And that's going to bring us to my third tier here: Trevor Lawrence, Jordan Love, Russell Wilson, Matt Stafford. The last of the guys who really matter here, who I okay starting, but I'm not super comfortable starting. And that begins with Trevor Lawrence, the third guy in this group, where I'm telling you, I think everybody is going to universally have these guys ranked 14th, 15th, 16th. And Trevor Lawrence falls behind this tier because, you know what? He has not been the quarterback 16 on the season. He has been the quarterback 22, according to my EV rankings on the season. Been pretty bad. Things haven't looked great. Tennessee is not as good of a matchup as we thought they were earlier on in the season for quarterbacks. Let me double check that. Yeah, I believe that is correct. They're a semi-tough matchup for quarterbacks, not necessarily a good matchup for Trevor Lawrence this week going up against Tennessee, though earlier in the season we thought it was. Things have shifted there a little bit, not as good against the run as they were previously, etc. And once again, it just hasn't been great for Trevor. But there are reasons for that we all know about, just the rushing touchdowns and everything. Sometimes the upside just hasn't been there despite fine quarterback play at times too. So that's where you get Trevor Lawrence just comfortably sitting him at 16 behind some of these guys who have all this upside and have performed better than him. And that brings us to Jordan Love. Very, very good matchup. He could have been a love one for me if I didn't go with Kyler Murray. He is my top streamer option of the week. Russell Wilson, done really well. Minnesota hasn't been as good of a matchup as, early on in the season. I was always saying they absolutely suck against the pass. They're a great matchup. They haven't been, they've been a pretty good defense, actually, as of late. Things have rounded out fairly well for them. I think some good defensive play calling, too, for the players that they have has all just come together and worked well for them. So, Russell Wilson, quarterback 15 on the season, same as Jordan Love. You just don't love it, but you feel comfortable enough to play him if you have to. Matt Stafford, quarterback 20 on the season via EV, have him ranked 19th this week if he plays. Of course, there is concern about the thumb. Seattle's been pretty good against the pass. It's not the greatest matchup in the world, but there are, you look at the player temperature gauge, there are reasons to suspect that Matt Stafford could have a big day if he is out there and if he is throwing well enough. And so that brings on the rest of my quarterbacks, a couple of tiers there. Feel free to look through them. If you have any questions on why I have somebody ranked where I have them, feel free to ask in the comments. But there are the complete quarterback rankings while I figure out your DFS plays of the week for week 11. In the not dirt cheap category, I've got you CJ Stroud at 7,000 DK bucks. Looked like a good price, a good value for where I have him ranked compared to the pricing. So I think he could be worth it if you want to go for that. Then in the cheapish category, there were quite a few good options. Josh Dobbs was, I think, a little bit cheaper than Brock Purdy. Kyler Murray was a little bit more expensive than Brock Purdy. Kind of landed right in the middle with my highest ranked of the three at Brock Purdy at $5,800. But there are some good options there around that price range for you to choose from. Brock Purdy's the one that I'm going with. And then down in the bargain bin, I got the last quarterback that I would be willing to actually play in DFS this week at $5,200. I didn't really like the pricing for anybody under him or the quarterbacks that are priced less than him. So I thought he gave you a little bit of value for the pricing, actually, for a quarterback who's been, pretty decent so far this season and isn't in a terrible matchup by any means. So there you go. CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, Russell Wilson, all guys who I would suggest trying to get into your lineup, depending on what price point you want to spend on your quarterback position. Thank you very, very much. Once again, come visit me live. We're going to start live stuff. Peace out.